What's going on YouTube? Mr. Wheels here once again. I'm back with another episode of Sports Talk. I'm going to be doing an NFL season preview for the 2014-2015 season. And before I get started, I'd ask you to, as always, please like this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Please follow me on Twitter at Sledgehead86. And like my Facebook fan page, Mr. Wheels86. Alright, so I've been studying the depth charts of each team, and I looked up a blog on ESPN called NFL Nation to get an opinion from, I believe it was sports writers, on who they thought would do well this year in the NFL. I'm not a huge NFL fan, but I wanted to give my viewers some variety in the sports that I talk about, so here we go. I'm going to start with the NFC East. Let's start with the Cowboys. They're predicted to have a record of 8-8, and at best, I see them no better than 9-7. Tony Romo is coming off back surgery, so we don't know how good he's going to be. The competition in the division's pretty tight, and I wouldn't say the Cowboys are a likely playoff team. Their offense is good, but not good enough to make the playoffs. That's what I have to say about the Cowboys. Now, the Eagles, not much better. They've lost to Sean Jackson, and this leaves their wide receivers pretty young and inexperienced. And they're predicted to go 9-7. I think that's pretty fair. And it very well could happen, but I actually believe that they will do the opposite and go 7-9, maybe 500 if they're lucky. I don't think Mark Sanchez is going to make that big of a difference. So, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team either. Now, let's move on to the Giants. And Eli Manning, let's face it, he has to have a bounce-back season this year. He's supported with a deep receiving core. They've got a good offense in New York. They're predicted to be 9-7, and I think that's pretty conservative. My prediction for the Giants is 10-6, and they could be as good as 11-5. And the Giants will most likely compete with the Redskins for the NFC East division title. And whatever team doesn't win the division out of the Giants and the Redskins, I expect them to compete for a wild card spot as well. And speaking of the Redskins, RG3, Robert Griffin III, has to have a good year this year. He's got to stay healthy. To me, he's got to prove that he can stay healthy and that he belongs in the league. I think he's still got some, proving of himself to do. But he's supported by a good offense. Steven Jackson, Pierre Garcon, I believe is how you say that, and Santana Moss, just to name a few. The Redskins are predicted to go 7-9. I think they could be as good as 10-6, or even better, depending on, like I've already said, depending on what RG3 does, and their defense may be a little suspect too, but I think they're a better team than 7-9. I would say they're at least going to be 500, but I expect the Redskins are my favorite to take the division. The Giants will challenge them, and then the Cowboys and the Eagles will round out that division, and that's the NFC East. Let's move on to the NFC North. Now, like pretty much any other division in the NFC, this division is wide open. Any team could take the division. Let's start with the Bears. Their offense is good enough. However, Jake Cutler, I don't know about everybody else. I'm not a fan of him. He didn't work out in Denver. I don't think he's going to help the Bears that much. But Brandon Marshall and Dante Rosario will help carry the team. and because Cutler, I don't think he's gonna help their cause very much. The Bears are predicted to be 10-6, and I think that's a best case scenario for the Bears. I could see them. I think a more realistic projection is 9-7, or even 500, mainly because of who their quarterback is, Jay Cutler, and they lost Julius Peppers to a divisional team in the Green Bay Packers. And despite him being 34 years old, I think because he went to a team in the division, that's going to hurt the Bears, who have been known in the past for their defense. Let's move on to the Lions. They're predicted to be 8-8 with a 500 record, but they picked up Golden Tate from Seattle in the offseason, and I think this should take some much-needed pressure off, the pressure off of Megatron, Calvin Johnson, and Reggie Bush needs to have a big year and help with the running game. Matt Stafford is a very capable quarterback, in my opinion, and the Lions could easily compete for a wild card spot, possibly challenge for the division title if they do really well, but 8-8 is pretty realistic, and best case scenario, they'd be another 9-7 team in my opinion. And moving on to the Packers now. The Packers are my team, but I'm going to be objective here. They are predicted to be 10-6. I think that's more than fair. Their saving grace for the Packers is obviously who their quarterback is. Aaron Rodgers, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think he's clearly the best quarterback in this division. But I think the problem with the Packers is losing Greg Jennings before last season. I think is still hurting their receiving core. You've got Jordy Nelson, who's going to be their go-to target, and then after that, they've lost James Jones to the Raiders. After that, you've got Randall Cobb, and hopefully their running game can pick up the slack between, splitting the offensive load on the running side of the ball between Eddie Lacy and James Starks, who are not the greatest running backs in my opinion, but Julius Peppers being acquiring him from the Bears, that will bring some much-needed experience to the offense, and it will help take the defensive responsibility, or it'll help share the defensive responsibility between Peppers, Clay Matthews, and A.J. Hawk. Those are the guys that I expect to lead the defense. I agree with the 10-6 record, but that's the best case scenario for the Packers. They should be able to pull it off, though, and I expect them to quite possibly win the division. Now, let's move on to the Vikings. They're predicted to be 8-8. Matt Castle is their QB. Christian Ponder is now projected as the third-string quarterback on their depth chart. Greg Jennings and Adrian Peterson need to carry the team on offense. I think 500 is realistic for this team. They can maybe make the playoffs if they do a little bit better than that, but I don't see it happening. So in this division, I see the Packers, narrowly taking this division over the Lions and the Bears. I think, the Bears, it's really hard to say. I think the Packers definitely take the division, and then it'll be between the Lions and the Bears to fight for that second spot and possibly a wild card position, and the Vikings will probably be dead last. So let's move on to the NFC West division, starting with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals are are predicted, believe it or not, on this site I was looking at, this blog that I found, the Arizona Cardinals are predicted to be 12-4. I disagree with that completely. Yeah, right. It's not going to happen in this division. Not with teams like the 49ers and the Seahawks, who are really good right now. The Cardinals, at best, I see them being 9-7, maybe 10-6 if they're lucky. But I could see them being as bad as 500 because Larry Fitzgerald, you got to expect that he's going to lead the offense, and he's old now, man. And I don't think they have the depth defensively that some of the other teams do. And Carson Palmer's their quarterback. Come on, not going to happen. The Rams, I don't really have much to say about the Rams. They're predicted to be a 500 team. That's generous. I've looked at their depth chart. To me, it doesn't look very, they don't look like they're going to be a spectacular team. I could see them being more like 6-10. Now, let's move on to the good teams in this division. The 49ers first and then the Seahawks. 49ers are predicted to be 12-4. To me, in my opinion, that is very accurate. They should take the division. The Seahawks are really the only team that I think are going to really give them some serious competition. But I think the 49ers, because of the type of quarterback that Colin Kaepernick is, and all of his options on offense, combined with a solid defense, the 49ers easily take the NFC West. And as for the Seahawks, my question is, are they going to have a Super Bowl hangover? And how much will they be affected by the retirement of Sidney Rice, who retired at the age of, I believe it was 27? That may affect the team negatively. I don't think they're as deep in offense as they were last season. They've lost Golden Tate. They won't be horrible. Obviously, you go from the best offense arguably the best offense in the NFC in the 49ers to the best defense, or arguably the best defense with the Seattle Seahawks, the Legion of Boom, I believe they are called. I want to know, will they continue their reign as one of the top defensive teams in the league? They could win the division. They're predicted to be 12-4, but I see them more as a 10-6 team, or maybe 11-5. So we'll see how that shakes out. But I have the 49ers winning the division. The Seahawks will be a close second and may take an NFC wildcard position, rounded out by the Cardinals, who won't be horrible, but they'll just be slightly better than the Rams, and the Rams will be dead last. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. Now let's move on to the NFC South. Rounding out the NFC conference, we've got, let's talk about the Saints first. Now, they're predicted to be dominant at home because of their schedule. They're predicted to be 11-5, which isn't, it's not a lofty record for them to have, but best case scenario, I see them being, 10-6, 9-7, more in that area, because their division has gotten better, and I don't think they're going to run away with it and have an 11-5 record. I just don't see it happening. Their team is getting older, so 10-6 probably best case for the Saints. They'll still compete for the division title and possibly a wild card, but I think the Falcons are going to really challenge them for the division this year. More on that in a second. Now let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're predicted to be 9-7. I'm really not. Their quarterback is Josh McCown. I've never really heard of him. He's been in the league for a while, but I've never really heard of him. Their defense should keep them competitive, but I predict at best they're going to be more of a 500 team. Now let's move on to the Carolina Panthers. They're predicted to be 500, but the offense is better. I think they're better than the credit that they're given. They've got receivers like Jericho Quattree, Jason Advent, I believe is how you say that. Probably pronounced that wrong. And Greg Olsen, and D'Angelo Williams is the running back. So this gives quarterback Cam Newton a pretty potent offense, in my opinion, in this division. How they'll fare outside of their division, well, that remains to be seen. Now, there's criticism about their offensive line. I don't think it'll hurt them that much. And I could see them being as good as 10-6. And challenging, putting pressure on teams like the Saints and the Falcons, competing for that division title. And speaking of the Falcons, they're predicted to be 9-7. And I see them being no worse than that. Devin Hester will help them on offense. He'll give some much-needed help to Rodney White and Julio Jones. Steven Jackson is the running back, and he's a solid running back. And this gives quarterback Matt Ryan a lot of options on offense, and I think they're a shoe-in for the division title. I think they're good enough this year, even though they imploded last year and went 4-12. I think they're good enough this year to compete for the division title. They're my pick to win the NFC South. Now, let's move on to the AFC, and starting with the AFC West. Now, first team I want to talk about, my Super Bowl favorites, the Denver Broncos. They had one bad game last year, in my opinion. It just happened to be the Super Bowl. They've got arguably the best offense in the NFL. Definitely the best offense in the AFC, because Peyton Manning has so many options on offense, and they've got better on defense. So they should win. They should run away with the division, in my opinion. They're my pick for AFC champions, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't get back to the Super Bowl this year. Now let's move on to a team. Or by the way, they're predicted to be 12-4. The Broncos, I mean, and yeah, I could see that happening, or even better than that. Now let's move on to a team that isn't predicted to do very well this season. A team that's been written off because of their tough schedule playing on the East Coast. I'm talking about the Raiders. And, they're predicted to be 5-11, if you can believe that. My prediction is that they will be a 500 team. They've picked up quarterback Matt Schaub, and James Jones came over from the Packers. Jones will bring experience, as he's been to the playoffs a lot with the Packers in his career. And they picked up Maurice Jones-Drew, and I think a change of scenery for Jones-Drew will be just what he needs, and it will make the team more competitive than what's being predicted here. They may not get back to the prominence they had in the late 80s and 80s and 90s, but they will be better than 11-5. In my opinion. Now let's move on to Kansas City. They're predicted to take a step back from their 11-5 season last year. predicted to be 8-8. I could see them still surprise again and be 9-7 or 10-6. But I don't see them challenging for the division at all. Now, the Chargers. The San Diego Chargers. This is the only team, in my opinion, that will give any sort of competition to the Broncos in the AFC West. They're predicted to be 10-6. Arguably, according to some, they're arguably the best offense in the NFL. I don't agree with that. They're obviously the best, second best offense in their division, and they will, like I've already said, they will put pressure on the Broncos for that division title. But I still say the Broncos run away with it. And let's move on to the AFC East. Let's start with the Buffalo Bills. They have a lot of young receivers, and E.J. Manuel, in my opinion, won't make much of an impact or a big enough impact for them to get to 500. They're predicted to be 7-9. I think that is just respecting them. My pick is that they would be 5-11, and if they're lucky, 500 at best. Moving on to the Jets, predicted to be another 500 team. They're solid at the QB position. Michael Vick, I could see him being quarterback by the end of the season. And the addition of Eric Decker won't improve the team enough for them to be any better than 500. Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. Predicted to be another 500 team. I think you can expect them to be better than the Bills and better than the Jets. So probably at best they're going to be 9-7. And that only leaves the Patriots. And just like the AFC West, I think the Patriots will easily take the division. They're predicted to be 11-5, which I think is a little unrealistic. More like 10-6, and I know that's only a one-game difference, but I just don't see them having an 11-game winning season. And you got to ask yourself, are they going to stay healthy? What's Gronkowski going to do? But either way, because of the division that they're in, with a lot of teams predicted to be 500 or worse, the Patriots will take this division quite easily. Now let's move on to the last two divisions in the AFC, starting with the AFC North. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. They're predicted to be 10-6, and I think they could be as bad as 500. 9-7 at best. To me, that's more accurate. 9-7. They're solid at the QB position. They have a half decent offense, and their defense should be solid. They could surprise and be this year's Kansas City. Let's move on to the Browns. They're predicted to be 6-10. The QB spot is Johnny Football's to take, in my opinion. Their defense will have to be just as good as their offense. I expect Miles Austin to help carry the offensive load. My prediction for the Browns is 500. I think that's fair. Let's move on to the Steelers. They're predicted to be 10-6. This could happen. The offense is solid. Their defense also is going to keep them competitive. So 10-6 in my opinion is realistic. Let's finish with the Ravens. Predicted to also be a 10-6 team. I agree, so long as they're off, as long as they can keep off-field distractions off the field. There's stuff going on with Ray Rice right now, so I question the character of the team a little bit, and they could implode themselves if they're not careful, and they're not as good as they were a couple years ago when they won the Super Bowl. So the Steelers could give them some challenge, but I still say the Ravens are the best pick to win the AFC North. The Bengals will be in there as well. Same with the Steelers. It's a tight division. The Browns will probably be dead last. It's really a toss-up. I don't think there'll be a clear-cut division winner at this point. It's going to be pretty even. But my pick are the Ravens. And finally, let's finish off this video with the AFC South. Starting with the Texans. They're predicted to be 8-8, 500. I disagree. They are known for their defense, but their offense is solid. They could be as good as 10-6. In my opinion, they'll challenge for the division title because of the division that they're in. Let's move on to the Jaguars. Predicted to be 7-9. I agree. They might have gotten better on defense, but I think they'll still be. I think this will still put them below 500, even if they do improve on last year's record. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans, they're predicted to be a 500 team. I agree, because while their offense is solid, I can't see them doing much better than 500. And moving on to the overrated Indianapolis Colts. I think this team is very overrated. Not saying they don't have a good team, but they're predicted, from the blog I read, they're predicted to be 12-4. In my opinion, not quite. They may believe, if you go into their website, they have this big video. Oh, we believe in this and blah blah blah, and they're full of themselves. In my opinion, I believe that they'll be good, but at best, 10-6, 11-5, maybe, not 12-4. Not going to happen, in my opinion. But either way, no matter the record, because of the division that they're in, they'll take the division title in the AFC South. Now, my predictions for Super Bowl is the Broncos, and I don't know. I'm not going to do a full jump. I'm not going to do a Super Bowl prediction. Just wanted to give my prediction of what will happen during the season. Again, these are just my opinions. Just want to give my viewers something different. No, this has been a long video. I will leave the blog that I read in the description box below, along with the NFL.com website, where you can go on and look at each team's individual depth chart and decide for yourselves. Once again, I'd ask you to please like this video, please subscribe to my channel, please follow me on Twitter at Sledgehead86, and like my Facebook fan page, Mr. Wheels86. Alright, and I will